Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep, literally and figuratively, into the newly synthesized, evidence-based medical protocols for retrieving an unresponsive diver. We're going to unpack the intense and honestly heavily debated science behind underwater rescue. Picture this for a second. You're submerged at 60 feet. You turn around and you spot a fellow diver. They are completely unresponsive, not moving at all. In that exact moment, you have to make split-second decisions. But are you relying on outdated diving myths, or are you following modern medical guidelines? It's a terrifying scenario, right? But understanding the actual science behind what works and what definitely doesn't can literally mean the difference between life and death. So here's our game plan for today. First, we'll look at the submerged rescue dilemma. Then we'll break it down into Phase 1, at depth, Phase 2 during the ascent, and Phase 3 at the surface. After that, we're tackling the big rescue breath debate. And finally, how to make that final critical call. All right, let's jump right in. Section 1, the submerged rescue dilemma, where every single second counts. Moving on to Phase 1, at depth. Now, our overarching priority is obviously getting the diver to the surface safely, but the very first decisions you have to make happen right down there at depth. Finding an unresponsive diver underwater is an incredibly perilous situation, and figuring out the absolute best course of action, well, that's an area of intense debate among leading medical experts, specifically the UK Diving Medical Committee and the Undersea and Hyperbaric Medical Society. Let's start with a super common question. If you find the diver and the regulator is out of their mouth, your immediate, totally natural instinct might be to force it back in to save them, right? I mean, it just feels like the right thing to do to restore their air supply. Well, actually, the medical consensus is a hard no. The UHMS guidelines firmly dictate that you should not attempt to replace a dislodged regulator. Why? The reality is that manipulating an unresponsive person's airway underwater heavily risks pushing water directly into their lungs. And honestly, there's very little chance of actually helping them resume breathing on their own down there. Instead, your number one priority is just getting them up. Now, what's really fascinating and kind of terrifying is how we handle a diver who is actively convulsing or having a seizure at depth. The protocol here entirely depends on that regulator. If the regulator is out, you ascend to the surface without delay. You got to prevent them from drowning the absolute second they take a breath. However, if the regulator is still in their mouth, you must hold it in place, seal their lips around it, and actually wait for the seizure to finish before ascending. It sounds counterintuitive, but a seizure causes the glottis to close. If you bring them up while it's closed, you're risking severe pulmonary barotrauma from the expanding gas in their lungs. Okay, that brings us to Phase 2, the ascent. As you start bringing the victim up, it's a delicate balancing act. You have to weigh the speed of the rescue against the unforgiving physics of expanding gas in the human body. You'll want to keep the victim's neck in a neutral or maybe slightly extended position. This just allows the expanding gas in their lungs to escape naturally. And listen, here's where we need to bust a massive myth. Do not press on their chest. You might have heard old advice suggesting chest compressions during ascent to force air out. Forget it. Modern guidelines confirm this just needlessly task loads you as the rescuer. Just focus on buoyancy and keeping an open airway. So the most crucial point during the ascent? Rescuer safety. It's a brutal reality of emergency response, but the UHMS emphasizes that you simply cannot put yourself at unreasonable risk. Think about it. If you, as the rescuer, have a massive decompression obligation, meaning a direct ascent would likely give you severe decompression sickness, it is entirely acceptable to establish positive buoyancy for the victim and send them to the surface alone. It's harsh, but you can't save someone if you become a casualty yourself. Which leads us to Phase 3, the surface. And right into the big one, Section 5, the rescue breath debate. Breaking the surface introduces the most critical and honestly the most heavily debated phase of the entire rescue. Once you're on the surface with a non-breathing diver, you are staring down sharply divided medical opinions. We're looking impartially at both sides of this fascinating debate today. On one side, you have the UK Diving Medical Committee. They strongly warn against in-water ventilation, urging rescuers to focus entirely on towing the victim to a solid platform as fast as humanly possible. But on the flip side, the UHMS argues that there is a variable window of opportunity to correct hypoxia, which is a lack of oxygen, with immediate rescue breaths, and doing so could potentially prevent the victim from going into full cardiac arrest. Now, the UKDMC bases its firm stance on some very compelling data. They point to the Winkler mannequin study from 2013. This study showed that trying to give breaths in the water often leads to significant water aspiration and causes major delays in the actual rescue. They also cite a 2004 study by Spillman, which noted a high incidence of severe neurological damage in survivors of in-water resuscitation. You combine all of that with the sheer physical exhaustion of trying to breathe for someone while you're both wearing bulky dive equipment in open water, well, you can definitely see why the UKDMC advocates for speed to shore over attempting in-water breaths.
All right, Section 6, making the final call.
So the big question, how do we synthesize these completely conflicting medical concerns into a single, actionable protocol? Something you can actually remember when your adrenaline is pumping in an emergency. To solve this, the UHMS developed a really brilliant consensus decision tree. Let's walk through it. Step 1 starts at depth. You assess the regulator. If it's in their mouth, maintain it. If they're actively convulsing, you wait it out as long as that airway is protected. But if they aren't convulsing or the regulator is out, you prepare to ascend.
Let's move to the next branch and see how this builds. Step 2 requires you to evaluate your own safety. Like we discussed earlier, if the ascent poses an undue hazard to you, like a massive decompression penalty, you have to make the absolute hardest call. Establish positive buoyancy for the victim and send them up without you. Now, if it is safe for you to ascend with them, you follow step 3. You keep their head in a neutral position to let gas escape on the way up. The very moment you break the surface, you immediately turn the victim face up and inflate their BCD to establish positive buoyancy for the both of you. And here is where we see a brilliant compromise between those two medical camps we talked about. Step 4 introduces the 5-minute rule. Right at the surface, you give 2 initial rescue breaths to see if there's any immediate response. Then you quickly evaluate. Is your boat or short support less than 5 minutes away? If help is close, so under 5 minutes, you follow step 5. You tow the victim while giving intermittent rescue breaths as best as you possibly can. This keeps some oxygen flowing during that short trip before you remove them from the water to start full, proper CPR on a solid surface. But if help is far away, more than 5 minutes, you move to step 6. You remain in place and give rescue breaths for just 1 minute. If there is absolutely no response after that minute, you must assume full cardiac arrest has occurred. At that point, in-water breaths are pretty much useless. So you stop wasting your energy on ventilation, put your head down, and tow them as fast as humanly possible to support. These synthesized guidelines provide the absolute clearest path through what is an incredibly complex medical debate. They perfectly balance the desperate need to restore oxygen with the very real dangers of water aspiration and rescuer exhaustion. But ultimately, looking at this whole protocol leaves us with one highly provocative question. In the sheer panic and heat of a real underwater rescue, are you fully prepared to make the hardest call of all and protect your own life first?